welcome to Upstage Downstage, with him, Richard Platt, seated in the upper circle.
And him, Stephen Rees, typically seated in the cheap seat.
This is the Theatre Podcast, where we discuss productions we've seen,
Things we've liked,
and may not have liked,
giving our complete unprofessional
and non-biased opinions.
So grab a brew,
Take a seat,
and let's raise that curtain.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing The Beekeeper of Aleppo. We saw this production at Nottingham Playhouse on the 17th of February 2023. The Beekeeper of Aleppo is based on Christy Lefterry's best-selling novel and has its world premiere in a brand new adaptation by Nesrin El-Rafai and Matthew Spangler. So Richard, what's it all about?
Nouri is a beekeeper. His wife Afra an artist. They live a simple life in the beautiful Syrian city of Aleppo until the unthinkable happens. When all they care for is destroyed by war, they are forced to escape. This compassionate and beautiful play is a story of connection between friends, families and strangers.
But first, our post-show opinion! Quite a compelling piece of theatre.
Thought-provoking theatre.
So with all that said, let's set the scene. So Richard, whilst I drink my coffee and you're wolfing down a waffle, would you like to explain, without spitting it everywhere, describe what the set looks like for those people who haven't seen the picture?
Okay, so when you walk into Nottingham Playhouse...
Well, you don't have to go that far back. What's on the stage?
Okay.
You don't need to tell them about
we used to do that,
where the toilets are.
Yeah, man.
Oh.
Okay. Well, we don't. I don't think we need to keep doing that because I just talk. It sounds a bit weird.
What?
As in when you walk into the Nottingham Playhouse, blah 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 blah. It's a bit right.
Yeah, there's a woman in front of some programmes. There's a brass band around the corner. The toilets around the side.
Was there a brass band? I didn't see that. Missed that one.
No, well that was Red Ellen. Well, there's a chorus of people.
Yeah, it was weird.
Now you finished your waffle.
Okay, so the set you're presented with when you are in the auditorium is I'd say almost desert-like, sand-blown set where what you can see is a framework of a house with just a few items of furniture that have been there for a long time, just stuck in the sand, in mounds of sand. There's an armchair, there's a little wooden door and a bed, and then there's just three mounds of these sand dunes, as it were. Yeah, that's the word. You can just see some canvas-style material on the actual framework of the house. So you just get the image of almost like a barn or a farm building. That's the way it looks, really. It doesn't give you a place or time, but it sets a scene that these things have been there for quite a while and a long time. It doesn't feel new. And then behind that, you've got the image of just clouds, but they're backlit, so they actually look quite...
3D and
3D and
like
change, and it feels... I think it's been done really well because you could have done projections at that point, but I don't think it. I think it looks better.
They did project onto the canvas and the screen at the back as well, didn't they? Well, in fact, over the sand.
Yeah, they did. But I feel like the painted background behind that. It's nice to have the blend between the projections and the sort of traditional theatre methods in a way, because it's that's really worked well. And just something I noticed as well from other productions we've seen, one thing I did like is that the sand and the floor space was covered edge to edge. You didn't feel like it was a set that was just plonked on the stage. It felt like it started and finished at both sides of the sort of staging of the production.
Yeah, I was going to say at first view, I saw this as being a stylistic piece.
Yes,
I knew everything
definitely
was properly thought out, and then having read the information in the booklet thoroughly, I thought I knew instantly where they were going. And I remember seeing a documentary where in Africa there were these abandoned houses that were filled with sand. They were just abandoned. I think it was from the old Victorian railways that used to be there.
Yeah,
and there had been a few people still living there. So I instantly got that by the sofa being trapped within the sand and the bed being in there with all the sand built up. So you could tell that a lot of thought, particularly the thought process behind this, was well researched, thoroughly researched, well documented, and technically speaking, technically from the point of view of theatre craft, that everything was analysed over what should be used, what shouldn't be used. How can we use a projection? How can we project onto the back of the set? How can we make the back of the set look like a sort of like a 3D screen in a way?
Yeah.
But also to showcase many different aspects of places around the place. So the like Athens and the UK and Syria as well. So it was quite an interesting design of a set.
And I think it's quite interesting you go there as well, Stephen, because for me, when you walk in and a set intrigues you before you've even seen the production,
absolutely,
that says a lot about a production, because it's the confidence of having those things put in certain places that, in a way, this is, in some ways, it's a very bare stage production. So,
yes, and if I can just interject there before, it reminded me also in a way of Ladies of Letters. You know how that excited me because of the simplicity,
the imposing letters on stage.
Yes.
It was just imposing letters, and it's like that's a very simple way.
Because
to look
sometimes at it. It's you get plays where it's a bare set and everything's on wheels and turns around and move. Nothing moved on this. The sand dunes didn't turn around and move. The chairs didn't move.
No.
It's ironic in a way because this story is about being displaced on a journey, moving about, and yet nothing on the set moved.
No, you're on fixed
nothing moved
stage.
About. Nothing.
Exactly.
Went anywhere.
No, because in a way you go to so many places, some parts have got to be fixed because it can become disorientating. If the production's got too much movement or too many things flying about, it can become too much. Because
a little overwhelming.
It can, and as an audience member, you get totally confused as to where things are. So we knew in a way that the storytelling was very much going to be done by the cast and by the things around them to actually become that.
And
that
again,
place.
very symbolic of the fact that the set stayed permanent.
Yes.
But the characters were modelled up, messed around,
and
were moving. And they used, later on, we'll probably go into more detail, but they used the sand dunes and climbed over the sofa and onto the bed to reenact that climbing off the edge of the precipice of the rocks to jump into the water, to get into the boat over the water.
It became a rock pool. It became that. It became those.
Well, it doubled up by also using the projections onto the sand dunes for making the waves in the sea. But that's when it becomes inventive. That's when you go out of the comfort zone of seeing what's physically there and asking the audience members to go on a journey with you to make believe in a way, make believe that this is where they're going. So it matters not that they're climbing over the chair, the armchair. You just in it with the ride with them.
You almost look past that because, one thing I probably didn't mention is that
what's on stage.
The armchair itself was covered in
embedded.
fabric, but it was done in such a way that the fabric matched exactly the same colour as the sand dunes. So everything looked stuck in time. It stopped. It almost
even
frozen.
the bed.
Yeah, the bed the same. Everything about every part of the stage was all one colour, and that takes attention to detail. Do
you think they did that in a way to aid the projection of the sand? Not the sand,
it
the
would
sea.
have done that. But also, if you didn't have the projections, you would less think that was a chair when somebody was climbing over it, like it was a mound or a rock or a.
But if that chair was bright blue or red, would the projection have worked on that?
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't have picked it up. So it's a dual thing. It's like
So thinking carefully about the design colouring, the colour elements as well.
And it also has an element of not creating a distraction when something's happening in another part of the stage as well, because it's there and you can see the silhouette of the chair and things like that.
In a way, it's just occurred to me that even though it's sand, it's Beekeeper, so it's honey-like.
Yes, exactly. It's hive-like. It's that sort of... the hives generally that cream colour,
and the backdrop is very much like the beehive.
Because we all talk about hive, but hives are home, and it's the same thing, isn't it? Really.
So I feel we're quite comfortable in describing the set now.
Yeah.
I think we've gone to town on that more so than we probably would have any other. So let's talk about the directing or the direction of it.
Yeah.
I felt like it was well directed.
Yes.
And it might be a little bit hard to pinpoint what I did or didn't like, simply because we've got this being transferred from a book to a script.
Yes.
So therefore, it's what's scripted as well. On the whole, I would say it was extremely well directed. As I say, the going up over the chairs to get onto the bed and recreating that whole escaping on a lifeboat.
Yeah.
Doubling up characters, and you instantly saw the different change of
Yes.
one character to another there.
Even if it was the same person, you
Even if
knew
it was
that
the
it
same-
was
yes.
somebody different.
Utilising the exits and entrances.
The production is made up of a lot of very small scenes.
It
So
really
it's,
is.
there's a lot of movement from one place in the world to another. There is a lot of
Very
flitting
choppy.
between, and very, very. I wouldn't say all over the place, but it's very small scenes that
I would
give
add
you the
there
journey.
that I felt it was all over the place.
Yeah,
The book, I believe, is quite linear when you're following Nuri and Afra's journey. However, what we saw was very cut and pasting of different elements. So it went back in time, not forward in time, but we didn't know whereabouts we were from 1 minute to the next. 1 minute they're in the UK, the next they're back in Syria, and then they're in Athens. And
Yeah.
it just got a bit confusing at times.
yeah.
However, the transitioning from scene to scene, all those little mini scenes, that was, I suppose, a little flawless.
Yeah, I was just going to say
it
that.
was lovely.
So there was no element of disorientation when I
It
watched
wasn't like Marigold Hotel, where
Oh,
end scene,
move-
on comes the music,
Yeah.
exit up the stairs,
Yeah.
off round the back of the beautiful
It
set.
was so
not-
smooth, the transitions from, it was so confident, with the doorways and things on stage. There was a window, and just one of the scenes where a receptionist for the sort
Dentist.
of doctor's surgery came out, and the window just opened,
yeah.
and she was in uniform, and people were queuing up to see her. It came out of nowhere, but instantly you knew you'd gone from Syria to England in a hospital or a doctor's surgery, and it was just so seamless that you just,
I think you also knew you were in the UK
Yeah.
when people were queuing up.
yeah, exactly.
And they couldn't get seen because they hadn't got the right box ticked in the paperwork, and it's all about red tape, and you just think, oh, NHS.
But I think directing wise, they were very restrained in making sure that if you were in that place, you did that. If you were in that place, you did that. And if you, as a cast, they all knew how to. They all knew how to make that each scene
well rehearsed.
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
The connection between all of them, like it was a family unit.
Yeah, definitely.
No one stood out because they
No.
were better than the other.
No, not at all.
You could tell
There was a lot of
everybody
strength from
gelled.
everybody's performance because of it as well.
And they all gave unique performances to their character.
Yes, definitely.
And each character had a story to tell of their own plight, trying to escape from Syria. So, is there anything else we need to talk about the direction?
I think
Shall we go straight on to the writing?
I think we need to go to the writing, because I think we'll pick up other bits through the writing, I think.
Okay. For me, like I have previously said, it felt a little jarring going from one time period to the next. Having read in the booklet of why they chose to do it, to give it a bit of a disorientation because they followed Nuri's psyche and his trying to process everything, I get what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
I understand that. However, as a viewer, it was a bit overwhelming, a bit too
Yes.
much, a bit here, there and everywhere.
Yeah.
I would have preferred a bit more structure to the journey.
Yeah.
But again, this is a stylistic approach, and
It is,
it's
yeah.
for someone else to have a vision, and I believe they followed their vision okay.
And I'll
But-
be honest, I mean, personally, I've seen quite a few adaptations, and certain adaptations
books
really
to
don't work.
stage.
Yeah. There's a lot of page to stage where it's
Plus films to stage.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's a very hard area to enter into.
Have you read the book, incidentally?
I haven't read the book.
No, I haven't. I'll be interested
But
to
I
read
can
the book
understand
now.
why they did it in a way of, I suppose really the only way to describe it is the production is a little like Fight Club, where you're watching a thing, believing a lot of things and seeing his vision of what's happening, and then in the second half you realise that actually not all of it's real, or not all of it's reality.
Maybe, I mean, because we haven't read the book, I just assume, or I'm feeling that we're just following the main character of Nuri and how he views the world, rather than perhaps knowing. I mean, that's exactly what he said at the very beginning. This is what happened, or at least it might not be what happened, but this is how I see it as happening.
Yeah.
So that setup was memorable.
Yeah, definitely.
So that The first couple of scenes, or at least the first act, I felt it was extremely long.
Yeah.
Very long, actually.
Yeah.
I'm not going to beat around the bush. It was too long. I did begin to wonder if this was a one-act play.
It wasn't until the second half that things started to sit in and you started to realise what happened in the first half. I think there was a little bit of disorientation in maybe the writing where you lost a little bit of the way. And then in the second half it started to tie up.
Sometimes there's an awful lot of stories to tell.
Yes.
And whether you edit those stories or you put them all in.
Yeah.
But again, I got a little bit confused with the Beekeeper of Aleppo, but yet the person who was the beekeeper, it didn't seem to me like the Beekeeper of Aleppo was Nuri. It was the other person. The other person who went to England, or was it? Did he go to Scotland?
It was his uncle.
Yorkshire.
It?
No, he went to, his uncle who went to Yorkshire. He was a beekeeper.
Yeah.
However, Nuri, I didn't feel was the beekeeper.
No.
Whether he is in the book and there's more of that, I don't know. However, felt like he'd just been trained and then he's trying to escape, but he's also having to deal with the loss of his son. And even Afra, who is an artist and lost her vision through the trauma, we don't know anything about her. Where is her artistry, her skills, and everything else?
Exactly.
Her story seemed to be
it wasn't as strong, was it?
It was just about her losing her vision, which I think supports the notion of it being Nuri's story.
Yeah.
The fact that he doesn't recognise her or see her anymore because they've sort of been lost.
Become distant.
Like she said herself, you know, it's not her that can't see, it's him.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful and moving piece,
definitely.
and I did wonder if it was going to start banging the drum in a certain way,
Yeah.
especially in the first part. But no, it redeemed itself because it answered a lot more of my questions.
Well, it showed a lot
more
of different perspectives and different viewpoints as well, and I think that was key to this, and I think that's where the second half, the writing of it, helped to show the other side. The exploitation side, the side where they're paying what, 12 grand or 1,200? They're duped into paying money or doing
passage.
For free passage. He'd got to work for and deliver packages unknown with no probably drug dealing to actually get safe passage, and this is where the exploitation comes in, and these people have sold the land of honey because they've got, as we talk about beekeepers, but they sold a dream, and that's the thing, because people's vulnerabilities can be exploited, and then that, unfortunately, there's people that when you're at the end of your line or end of your tether, you've got to find somewhere to go, or you literally have nowhere to live, or you are stuck in a location that you can't get out. Your survival kicks in, and you have to do what you can to protect your family, but it's not always the right thing or a good thing to do, because you end up, you have to do bad things to get where you want. And I think that's what, luckily, the second half balanced the first half and showed that not everything's as it seems on the outside, and it's it's a lot harder than people realise just to,
And I think the second act explored more Nuri's psyche, especially because it got a bit twisted with the eventual revelation that his son was lost.
Yes.
But also this other character coming in. But it transpired that this character wasn't in the lifeboat at all, that it didn't exist, and it was all in Nuri's head. So it was more of a psychological...
And it showed how much trauma he'd been through, but not necessarily...
Yeah, but like the second act was more psychological unravelling of everything that had gone sort of beforehand.
Yeah, definitely.
Where it just confused us, but also probably answered a lot of the knots that were in the first act.
Exactly.
I think I'm just knotting my own thoughts up, just trying to unravel.
But
this.
I think you saw his wife maybe visibly show how much trauma she'd been through by the blindness induced by trauma and stuff like that. His was far more cerebral, and it's far more confusion and things that he was dealing with. It was almost like blocking out certain things, replacing them with others to actually deal with situations.
So is there anything else you'd want to discuss about the writing before we move on to our next subject?
I suppose one thing I'd say is they...
Oh, you do you?
Yeah, well, yeah. I think they tied up the storylines in the second half, which I felt actually helped. They were very mindful. The writing was very mindful. The adaptation, shall we say, it did feel like you left with a lot of things tied up, finished, and you knew where a lot of the journeys had been and gone and stopped. Even with a small moment or a little glance or a little look, like when he was reunited with his uncle, it was there, but you didn't need many words. It's just you knew it had happened. And I think that was... There's a lot of things where I think it can be forgot very easily, that we need to see some resolve or some final moments. Even if you just get a glimmer, you know that, you know, most of it's been tied up. A little bit like the
But also,
lady...
yes, but to add to that particular storyline, throughout all the play, even when they were separated from that, they did keep in touch via email or the internet, so they did have those moments along
little tiny
the,
little glimpses into the links, and a little bit like the lady who was from Somalia, where she had a baby taken off her in Athens. I felt like they moved to Kenya to take a baby to a safe haven, and in her sleep she got a baby taken off her, and then she moved to Athens, and she's almost still looking for her baby, even though she will never find that baby again because of trafficking, whatever's happened. That baby's been taken off her forever, and she almost became the maternal mother for the area of the that she was staying in the park in Athens, because she got no real place to stay. And even though most of the people in Athens were being exploited by gangs or by this, by the other, she became that maternal mother that mothered all the people that came there who were unsure of what to do in their lives. And, you know, and I think she found them, you know, that's where they ended the story of her. But you knew that, unfortunately, that was the end of the road for her, as in a way she'd accepted her life at that point. That's where she'd got nowhere else to go, and that was her almost. But there was a lot of other things where, like we say, I just felt like they, in the second half, you got some resolve from a lot of the things that you saw happen. Don't really know what more to say.
I don't know. I mean, you could have another 5 minutes to go around the houses and say the same thing.
So talking.
Moving on to our next segment, as we say, we're
Here for the drama.
As a whole, they all gave strong performances, and I feel like the comedy moments drew me more towards the uncle, simply because he was trying to be like a geezer.
Yeah.
Which confused me a little bit, because they were in London, and then one of the scenes there was in Yorkshire. But I think that's how the timing was played out in terms of how they structured it. But with the acting, it was quite powerful. There was a realness about every single one of them, like an authentic performance.
Yeah,
they were connected with the character.
I don't think anything was overplayed, but it was specific to say you got definite differences in dialect, as in their accents changed at the right point. But the volumes and the throws of all the cast members was great, because it drew you in. You knew when somebody needed to take command and be that authoritative person, or you felt like that happened right. And
yeah, and I'd say there was 2 instances where I actually noticed about the accents. I think one was, the lady's name, the actress's name is Nadia Williams. The first character I see of her was this Yorkshire woman. I thought, is she putting that accent on, or is that hers? I wasn't quite sure. I thought it was very, very strange, very odd. They're in London, but then with a Yorkshire accent. Yeah. Unless they were in Yorkshire. Yeah. And there wasn't in London, but then the previous scene was London. Anyway, the time thing baffled me a lot of the time, but when I saw her then play the Somali woman, and then there was these other accents coming out, I thought, oh wow, very versatile. Oh, this is great then.
But you almost didn't recognise her.
Exactly,
it was so well transitioned to somebody completely different with a different characterisation.
Yeah, exactly.
You almost forgot that it was the same person.
Yes, and the second time I noticed an accent change was Afra, played by Roxy Faradini. I think that's your name. When she was talking afterwards about donating money for people of asylum afterwards, it was as if she just went back down. Well, she did go back down to a normal voice, but it sounded so familiar, as if she was a local within the community of East Midlands, Nottingham, Derby. I don't know, but obviously it wasn't like Yorkshire, an accent that I could spot a mile away. And yet she'd been playing this character was a very different accent. Yeah. Well, it would be a Syrian accent.
While we're talking about Afra, one thing I noticed with Roxy is she'd done a lot of work on, because mostly through the production she played a blind character. And all the way through the production she played really well where even though she obviously could see, you could tell that she was a blind person, and it was the distance look, or not looking at people in the eyes, or almost looking at a different direction all the time. She was very conscious of the fact that she was blind.
I think also probably I'd say too conscious, where even if you're blind and you can't see, I'm sure you'd still look to someone's face.
You'd follow the voice, yeah.
Yeah, and there was a time where there was a lot of avoidance from there.
But then I suppose she was newly blind in a way. It might have been she's not lived with it. This is through trauma, and this blindness is a bit different. But what I would say is,
if you're facing someone you're talking, you'd still move your face to there, whether you can see out your eyes or not.
But the transition from that to when she started having her sight was very different in her performance. You saw the transition
came alive
in the second half when she actually started to get her vision back. You saw it change, and I think to make it visible on stage is very difficult.
Perhaps then it was a choice.
Yeah, it could have been a directing choice. You don't know, because then it's visible the change if it's quite a contrast.
Either way, if it was meant to be or not, it was noticeable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
But I wouldn't say it. I hold it against.
No,
I don't mean it like that in any way. It was just
no.
It was noticed. I think all of them, all of the cast did exceptionally
also
well.
The lady
Joseph
that played
Long,
the young boy, for me,
Mayub.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of shape shifting in this production. Even though these people are the same people, you had to really focus on, is that the same person that we've just seen do something else? Because it focused around the main characters. These other people were all very committed to doing each of the characters they did on top. And I think that was very noticeable.
Absolutely.
And I think they were very key in making Nuri and Afra not do any other characters, because I think that's very important.
Well, I think you have to, simply because they're the main characters, they're the main parts.
I have in my past, and I've seen productions where they have had main principal cast do other characters, and it just breaks the tension completely. So it was really nice that they actually stuck strong to their
they're
the way they did
the journey.
Yeah,
they
are,
and because everything's happening to them. All these extra characters are just visions.
It's almost like they're walking down a road and people are interacting as they go, and it can be the same people, but they've all got different things, and it worked really well.
I thought Joseph Long gave a comedic performance.
Totally.
In every line that he delivered was brilliant, and I thought even Aram Madorian, I'm going to get these names wrong, aren't I? I felt he shapeshifted a lot in the characters
really well,
but he played, in a way, you could say, an excellent baddie.
Yeah, he did,
because potentially that's all the roles he
had all the subtleties of the bad exploiter, shall we say, that that comes out of nowhere,
but typically lived and played the characters that were there as the people the leads went against.
Yeah, definitely.
At the time.
Yeah,
the thorns in the side.
But very different characters as well.
Absolutely.
You've gone from a hoodie wearing sort of gangman to a cigar smoking, balding beer drinker.
Probably,
and it felt such a contrast.
Quite liked him as well. It's quite nice.
I know he was. Moving on to our next segment, as we say, what the tech is this?
There's a lot of technical stuff in this, isn't there, Richard? Let's face it.
Yeah, obviously when you have a bare stage production and you are using projections and you haven't got anything else on stage, you're reliant on sound and lighting to actually create this journey and to create the spaces on stage for it to look different and to look like every scene's different. And I think that was key. I mean, lighting-wise, in a way it was very... almost all done in white light, but there was a lot of spots. There was a lot of small focused areas that were lit to actually take you from place to place. So, there was focus on, if it was a scene where they were doing an interview, it'd almost a little bit feel like they were in Mastermind, where it would focus on that area of the stage. So you were...
And on the chair.
So you were almost... Yeah, so it'd almost feel like they were under investigation, and then you'd go to like the scene where they'd be sat on the mound like it was a garden, and you'd feel like they'd moved to another area, a nice brightly lit place, and then we add the projections into the mix, and you start feeling like
heavily projected because they turned the back cloth into. I mean, when I say back cloth, I don't mean the screen at the very back.
The canvas.
I just mean the canvas.
Yeah.
They projected images of war-torn Syria.
Yeah.
They showed videos and even bits where Nuri and Afra went hiding.
Yeah.
They showed a video. They utilised not just the stage but other media technical stuff.
And I suppose we didn't really mention the actual door on the stage. There was a door in one of the mounds that was only used for the scene where they were hiding from people with guns and people that could have killed them there and then. And the little moment, like you say, where they got in there, you actually saw on the screen the other side of that.
Yeah, they were using multimedia to make this show come to life. And I wonder if the artistic choice to use real live images, not like a live camera, but the real footage, it was used to try and evoke a lot more realism into it.
Yeah, it's to pinpoint what was actually happening, I feel.
And there's lots of bees as well in the night.
Yeah, but it expands the world that they're in as well, and that's what we talk about, expanding that. It gives you those vivid moments that take you there, but they didn't over project. I felt like they only used it when they needed to. They didn't. It
was more for supporting the narrative that was going on the stage.
Yeah, definitely. There wasn't a lot of they didn't use it for. It wasn't like watching a film, or they didn't use a lot of dialogue in that. It was more about them on stage, and they were supporting images to it's like, but they weren't busy and they weren't over the top. They were just almost like wallpapers and things like that, but it was enough to take you to those places. A bit like when they were getting into the boat, which was the bed. They were crossing the mounds, but there was water everywhere and it was all over the stage, and you felt like you were by the sea. You felt like they were in the sea and things like that.
And that helped with the sound effects.
It did,
well.
Yeah, because there was a lot of sound effects in this. There was a lot of reinforcement music to create little swells of things.
What I would pick up on the fact that what I felt was lacking, this goes to the writing now, but I'll say it here because it's technically the sound effects that I'm going for. Even though we saw the aftermath, we also saw people running around with guns, but they spent a lot of time talking about how difficult it is to claim asylum, and that the story was about them. They washed over or ignored the war completely. The story, like
how bad the war was.
Why were they running in the first? Not running, but why were they leaving or needing to claim asylum from the first place? So therefore, because they missed that bit, and it was about the difficulties of trying to get asylum that they focused on the journey, instead of who are fighting who, what's going on, why aren't they staying to fight, and all this. You've also got in the technical side of things where I can't remember much gunfighting or the effects of war.
Bombs dropping.
Had there have been like a replay of how bad it was whilst they were living or trying to live when everything was cracking off, and using all the side effects. The sound effects, not the side effects. The sound effects of guns and stuff. I mean, it probably might have triggered some people. But if they'd have used just a moment of that, as like in the mind going
even
off.
The sound of distant bombs, or maybe not just that, the transition from that scene back to the interview where you flick back with a bomb and it's back into the
it's post-traumatic stress, isn't
yes,
it, that
it
he's
is,
going through.
It is.
But what we never got in this play was how bad the war was living through it.
Exactly, being there.
All we knew was that his place was destroyed, and we saw the whole town of Aleppo decimated.
I suppose
that's all we had in projections, but there was nothing to explain the actual war itself and the reasons for that.
And I suppose if you're in a place where bombs are dropping and you're hiding in a bunker under your house or whatever, there'd be vibration noises, or there'd be something, there'd be rumblings, and it'd feel more like it's close and it's gonna. But I do think overall it needed a lot of things thrown at it as a whole production, because you couldn't have just done this without that. You could strip the set and take everything away, but you'd need that sound space to create what they did on stage with this. And I don't think it was overused. I think it was I think it was pitched right, and the things we mentioned are only things that would have enhanced it more to actually just add more power to that war side of the actual.
But I just felt that backstory could have just been explored a little bit more, rather than it just being there's a war we need to escape.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people need to know why, what is it, and to showcase that rather than just accept that is.
Yeah,
especially
exactly.
with the narrative or the viewpoint they're trying to explain in this production.
Yeah.
Because it need to be like a
no,
bit of a clip or a
it's
bit of
not
a breakdown.
Much.
It's just to get under the skin and get into the psyche of him having this breakdown and reliving those scenes to support it.
Yeah.
And now it's time for
Rewind Rewatch.
I think I would. Oh, I'm not going to ask you. Sorry.
It's all right. You go first.
The one thing I would like to rewatch again would be the whole trying to jump from one sand dune to the other, aka they're getting into the life bit, because I enjoyed that. It had great projections onto the sand dunes for the sea, and the whole energy and the acting and the trepidation of going to, risking their lives for this new safe haven, shall we say. That was quite a powerful and evocative view, I suppose. Scene. Because they were risking their lives.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I agree, because from a set that basically takes a bed and turns it into a dinghy, and it feels like they're in the sea and it actually feels real, I think that's very, very difficult to do, and it's, it takes a cast that are all working as a team to make it feel like that's bobbing about in the sea and things happen, and I personally enjoyed that as well. It's hard to say enjoy, but I think it's that scene actually became very poignant and said a lot about this production, really.
Moving on to our final segment, as we say, call this a show? So let's summarise up now then. Your overall thoughts on this production?
Thought it was well put together and thought-provoking. I think it left questions in my mind of things that I may want to look into and just get a bit more context on some of the things in the production. It also made me maybe want to read it, because I think it might be nice to see the contrast between the book and the production. And I thought the cast did really well and they acted really well. So yeah, overall I enjoyed it. I do think I agree with you, Stephen, on the first half. It did seem to maybe gone a little too long.
Yes, as you've rightly said, I did think it dragged out a bit too long on the first half. Second act was well knitted together, well put together. I liked the stylist choice that they went for, and the symbolism within it.
Yeah,
I liked a lot, and I thought it was quite excellent. I thought it was well directed. I feel all the cast was brilliant. I did struggle a bit with the time flipping here, there and everywhere. It did come across as a bit mismatched and rushed about and displaced. I get where they were going for, but I don't feel it worked completely, because in nature we like things that are structured.
Yeah.
When we view things a bit like artwork, when it's not symmetrical, when it's not we know what's a bit jarring and what isn't, basically, don't we? And I feel this has a tendency of just jarring at times for the sake of them telling the story, and that they needed to tell the story of those people. I thought it was extremely well executed. Scores then please, Richard, for The Beekeeper of Aleppo, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a safe sanctuary and 1 being a desperate need for survival. What are you going to give it?
I give this a 7 out of 10. I think there's a few little bits that could have made it, in the sort of 8s and 9s, but I think, I enjoyed it. And yeah, so 7 out of 10.
I would like to give this an 8. I feel it was entertaining in a moving, thought-provoking, dramatic way. I suppose in a way it's a drama, so those kind of plays I'm not necessarily keen on watching again, because I've seen it and I've understood it, but it's left a lasting impression, a bit like The Homecoming in a way.
Yeah,
it's one
definitely.
of those where, great to see, but I won't go and see it again.
Yeah.
Whereas something light and frivolous, like, I don't know, Cluedo, for example, easy to watch.
Definitely.
I'd see that again just for the entertainment factor. Whereas some plays, some theatre nights out, you go not just for entertainment, but for education as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what sound effect will you be choosing from the following? A complete train wreck, tumbleweed, an audible shrug of the shoulders, a slow clap, a pleasant applause, or a standing ovation. What will it be?
I'll give this a pleasant applause.
I'm going to give this a standing ovation. So there we are. That's our discussion of the Beekeeper of Aleppo. We hope you found it insightful.
If not, entertaining.
Coming up over the next few episodes, we will be discussing
Pride and Prejudice, sort of.
And Richard takes another trip to the West End, soaking up yet more theatrical delights. So stay tuned.
Oh. If you'd like to get in touch, email us at upstagedownsstagepod@gmail.com. You can always join in the chat to share with us your views of a production.
Also, make sure to follow, share, like and subscribe to all our channels so you get every episode the second it's released. And we hope you join us again for another instalment of Upstage Downstage.
Number 41, the Beekeeper of Aleppo. The Bookkeeper of Apollo. The Bookkeeper of Aleppo.
The Bookkeeper of a Leopard.
The Bookkeeper of Aleppo.
Aleppo.
Aleppo, Aleppo.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing The Beekeeper of Aleppo is based on Christy Lefterri's. Christy Lefterri's. The Beekeeper of Aleppo. The Bookkeeper of Apollo.
They live a simple life in the beautiful city. They live a simple life.
How are you getting this wrong? It's easy. The Beekeeper of Apollo. No, the Beekeeper of Aleppo. The Beekeeper.
When all they care for is destroying what?
Look, it's based on Christy Lefterri's.
Lefterri.
The Beekeeper of Apollo. No, the Beekeeper.
One line. You got one line. When all they care for is destroyed by war, they are forced. No, that was I just pitched that completely wrong because I wasn't reading the next bit.
The Beekeeper of. I haven't even got to the bloody other writers' names yet. Let me have a sip of coffee.
Do you want me to do it?
No, I'll do it.
He will get there. He's going to get there. When all they care for is destroyed. When all they care for is destroyed by war, they are forced to escape. No.
The Beekeeper of Aleppo. The Beekeeper of Aleppo. The Beekeeper of Aleppo is based on Christy Lefterri's. Is based on Christy Lefterri's. Say. Christy Lefterri's is based on Christy
This compassionate and beautiful play is a strong discompassionate
is based on Christy Lefterri's best-selling novel and had its world premiere in a brand new adaptation by what is it?
Nesrin Al-Rifai.
Nesrin
Al-Rifai. There's no
Al-Rifai.
Al-Rifai. Nuri is a beekeeper.
No, go back from what there, why don't you? Al-Rifai. Al-Rifai. You can shout at me all you want. It's coming out how it comes out. Aleppo. The Beekeeper of Aleppo is based on Christy Lefterri's. Is based on Christy Lefterri's. The Beekeeper of Aleppo. No, just forget that.